Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the October edition of the MUSC Conversation Cafe. Today we are falling into sustainable nutrition. My name is Christine von Kalnitz. I am the Sustainability Manager of MUSC. Really appreciate you coming today. I just want to give you a little bit of information about sustainability at MUSC. Our mission is to sustain MUSC builds healthy communities by inspiring and implementing solutions to environmental, social, and economic challenges. And on the screen, you can see some of our initiatives. Of course, they include food and recycling, composting, and transportation. And we're really getting into energy and trying to save energy around the campus as well. I am going to turn this over to Rachel.
Hi everyone, my name is Rachel Whitbeck. I'm the Sustainability Assistant here at MUSC. So just so you know, we do have a monthly newsletter that goes out to stay in the loop on events like this one. We also have a couple of other things going on, so you can sign up online. Our website is musc.edu/gogreen. We're also on all social media. We're in the process of even getting a LinkedIn, and we're also MUSC Go Green on all of that: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. This event is being recorded. It will be posted on our YouTube page. If you know somebody who would be interested in this, or if you miss it for some reason, then it will be posted in about a week or two. So because it's recorded, if you don't want your face on the recording, then please turn off your camera. We ask you to do that anyway if you're not speaking, because it does save energy. And we are also on MUSC's internal platform called Yammer. We are Broadcast Sustainability. So looking into the future, like I said, these are monthly events. And next month, we're going to be focusing on food waste. So this month is food, next month is food waste. And we're going to have a speaker from Don't Waste Food SC, which is under DHEC. So stay tuned for that. We'll be posting on all of our social media, like I said, to stay updated. And so for today's event on sustainable nutrition, we have a couple of speakers from our Office of Health Promotion. We have Dr. Susan Johnson, who's the Director of Health Promotion here at MUSC. She's the founder and CEO of worksite wellness firm Vin City and the co-founder and director of the Charleston Healthy Business Challenge. We also have Laura Nance, who is a registered and licensed dietitian, certified diabetes, dare, and education specialist, and she's currently working with MUSC's Office of Health Promotion as their wellness dietitian. So I will now turn it over to you guys for your presentation.
All right, thank you for the introduction. I'm going to start the show today. All right, so obviously sustainable nutrition, yay, here we go. All right, so what is sustainable nutrition? I pulled up a couple of different definitions, and obviously there's quite a bit on the internet, but I thought these were all pretty worthy sources. Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, which is my hub, describes sustainable eating about choosing foods that are helpful to our environment and our bodies. The Dairy Council of California describes sustainable nutrition as ensuring wholesome, nutrient-dense foods are accessible, affordable, and culturally relevant, which while also preserving environmental resources and supporting local communities. So this definition really puts the not one size fits all approach into it. Eating, diversely depending on your culture, your finances, and your food access. That's the spin on this definition. And the third one, sustainable diets, are those diets with low environmental impact, which contribute to food and nutrition security and to healthy life for present and future generations. So I want to point out about that one is really looking to preserve for future generations. So we have a couple of different takes on the definition here, but at the end of the day, we're looking at planet and human health, basically. Okay, so my objectives for the next couple of 20 minutes or so, I'm going to talk briefly about food and diet, the impacts on your health. I'm going to talk briefly about the impacts on the planet, and then maybe ways to enact some change, which is really the fun part of this. I do want to spend a few minutes going over the whys, like why are we looking to this? Why are we looking for change? Why are we encouraging change? So my first slide is really about the impacts of food and nutrition on your health. These are the leading causes of death in the United States, updated in 2019 by the CDC. And I have quite a few of them highlighted, and I have the ones highlighted that we know: diet and lifestyle can make an impact in, okay? And what I mean by that is certainly genetics can certainly play a role in these chronic diseases, but we know that up to 75% of an impact can be from your diet, your lifestyle behaviors, whether or not you actually alcohol intake, smoking, all those types of things, and specifically what you consume can certainly have a very positive effect in reducing the risk for these chronic diseases, up to 75% of an impact. So significant impact on what you're consuming with what you're consuming. And some of these other ailments or things here too, we know sometimes diet is used or nutrition is used to treat some of these ailments as well. So not just from a preventive perspective, we want to think about the treatment perspective as well. I didn't highlight Alzheimer's disease, but we do know that there is some good literature that speaks to certain, food intake as decreasing the, the aging brain, decreasing risk for the aging brain, which can be related to Alzheimer's disease and some other things too. So it's something to kind of keep in mind there. Okay, so this is another slide that really represents the food and diet impacts on health and by way of malnutrition. So malnutrition can certainly be described in several ways. We have undernutrition, which is not getting enough, starving, protein malnutrition. There's a lot of different categories in here. And that can certainly come from food insecurity, meaning we don't have the financial means to take food, to get food, and then also food access. And that might be, I live in a food desert. Overweight is also in this category too. It is certainly can be a form of malnourishment. And this could come from, again, food insecurity, and also access to healthy food would be the other piece of the puzzle there. And we also have micronutrient related malnutrition. So these are kind of the three hubs of malnutrition in the United States. And just kind of as a side note, the number one micronutrient deficiency in the United States is actually iron deficiency. And all this will kind of come full circle in a minute. Certainly you can have a micronutrient deficiency because you don't have access to food or appropriate food, but also it could come back to some of the farming practices and whether or not our soil actually has enough nutrition in it to then end up in our crops so that we can consume it. So this all really comes full circle here. All right, so my next couple of slides are really more about the planet impacts that food might have. So this slide is specifically about food waste in the United States. So just a couple of facts here. The United States food waste is estimated at between 30 to 40% of the food supply, and that's from the data from the USDA. The EPA estimates that more food reaches landfills than any other material in our municipal solid waste. And so that makes up about 24% of what is in actually the landfills. Wasted food is generated from households, food manufacturers, numerous commercial establishments like restaurants, cafeterias, and then other public institutions, so schools, correctional facilities. And so that talk November 10th that was introduced earlier will be a really good one on food waste. I actually have seen that talk before, and it's just fabulous. It'll encourage you to make some changes. So what are some reasons for the loss at each of these different stages? So just briefly, spoilage is probably the number one thing, and that can actually occur at lots of different stages. We can have spoilage from the get-go in the field. If it costs too much to pull the crops, off of the yield and put them into market, and I'm not going to make a profit off of that, then a lot of times the crop or the food will stay in the land and not be pulled at all. You could also have problems during the processing of the crop, drying, milling, transporting, processing foods, exposure to insects, rodents, heat, light, all that kind of stuff. So spoilage can certainly occur at any stage. We also know at the retail level, equipment malfunction in the grocery stores, over ordering in the grocery stores is another thing, and culling of blemished produce can also result in food loss, and that's a good one. It's basically where you kind of pick and choose the prettier fruits and vegetables consumed, and the others kind of sit there and start to spoil. So all those are reasons that we might see food loss. And again, food waste certainly does have a negative environmental impact. And then the other one too is us purchasing too much and throwing out excess and putting it into the landfill, or composting or not, and just having extras in general. And just kind of on a positive note, In 2015, the USDA joined with the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency to set a goal to cut nation's food waste by 50% by the year 2030. And Susan's going to speak to that a little bit more about some of the ongoing initiatives to make an impact. All right, so my next slide again is really about some of the impacts that our food and diet have on our Earth or our planet. This graph is from the World Resources Institute, and it's really showing you the land use needed to produce these different crops, as well as the water usage needed. And also the orange represents the emissions that are produced when we're producing these items. To the right of the dotted line, you'll see animal-based foods, and to the left you'll see the plant-based foods. And clearly you can see by the slide that certainly animal-based foods have a bigger impact on the environment. You know, more land use, more water use, more energy use, and then also more emissions as well. Beef in particular, we pick on that one a good bit. It's for a reason. Cattle in general, they eat fiber, but they digest it. And as they digest it, they produce methane gas. So they're one of the bigger contributors to methane gas when it comes to food production. So that's why beef in particular is picked on a little bit. Okay, so given all of that, those slides really represented what unsustainable nutrition looks like. So just to kind of recap, right? Because if we continue down those paths, you know, we might be in some trouble. So unsustainable nutrition is the inability to keep up with demands and access to providing nourishing food for a growing population. And Susan will talk about that in just a little bit too. Food production practices that are damaging to the environment, food waste and packaging that's damaging to the environment. And this includes, you know, the greenhouse gases that are given off, the land use, the fresh water use, potential for species extinction, ecosystem damage, all of those things. And then also food consumption patterns that promote health concerns is a part of unsustainable nutrition. So we talk about sustainable nutrition. Remember, the focus is on what's good for the planet, but what's also good for us. What allows us to live a good quality of life and a nice longevity as well. So some of those food consumption patterns, which we'll talk about in just a minute, you know, the health concerns are they could promote excess weight and obesity, and they could promote an increased risk for chronic disease as well. So a little bit on just kind of the Western style diet pattern in general, generally tends to be full of or have a decent amount of refined carbohydrates, added sugars, increased sodium, some of those unhealthy fats. We generally see a higher intake of animal products in the Western style diet as well, and then an overconsumption of calories. So those are the concerns, and that's what we would describe as unsustainable nutrition. So now I'm just going to focus for the next 10 minutes or so on, well, how can we improve that? Because the end goal is improvement for your body, improvement for the planet. So I'm going to focus on reducing food loss and waste, and the shift towards a mostly plant-based diet pattern. So this is from the EAT organization. It's a global nonprofit startup, and their goal is basically to focus on healthy diets from sustainable food systems. So their end goal is healthy diets, good nourishment for the body, what from sustainable food systems. Okay, so their suggestion is based on all their data, and this is an organization that has scientists from 16 different countries. So it's a very diverse organization, but what they're encouraging is a diet pattern that promotes more high quality plant-based foods. And that would be your legumes, all your beans, whole grains, vegetables, fruits, and nuts. They're also encouraging lower amounts of animal-based foods in the diet, lower amounts of refined grains in the diet or refined carbohydrates, lower amounts of added sugars, lower amounts of unhealthy fats. But also with the idea that we want this to be somewhat flexible. We want it to be inclusive of different cultures and traditions of eating and different dietary patterns as well. Okay, so what does that look like visually? I'm a visual person, so I kind of like to see this, but and you might have to zoom in a little bit, but basically what this diet, you know, or style of eating looks like that's healthy for us and healthy for the planet is really half that plate of fruits and vegetables. So half of that plate, certainly more plant-based intake, and then another quarter with whole grains, which is again plant-based intake. So you're really looking at about, 75-80% of this food intake to be plant-based versus animal-based. And then you've got some other things in there. You've got your beans and your nuts and your seeds and some healthy fats as well. So that's kind of a visual of what that looks like. So let's compare it to the Mediterranean style of eating. And I use the word diet here just because I feel like that's how everybody recognizes the Mediterranean diet. But sometimes the word diet can certainly be misinterpreted. It is really about a style of eating or a pattern of eating. So when we talk about these two diets, they're really styles of eating. So I feel like that's the preferred word here. So the planetary health style of eating. They're promoting at least half of your plate with high quality plant-based foods. Again, legumes, whole grains, vegetables, fruits and nuts, limited amounts of animal-based foods, limited amounts of refined grains, added sugars and unhealthy fats. This looks just like the Mediterranean style of diet. I wanted to put these side by side, and certainly they're using different words, eat less, eat more, decrease, avoid, those kind of things. But for the most part, these diets look very similar. So why did I pull up the Mediterranean style of eating? Is because they've got evidence-based claims to reduce the risk for those chronic diseases that I presented earlier that are decreasing our quality of life and longevity. So heart disease and stroke and diabetes. It's supposed to be able to help with overweight too, which again puts us at risk for some of these chronic diseases. So overall, all-inclusive premature death decrease with the Mediterranean style of eating. And again, it looks very similar to the planetary health style of eating that came up by the Eat Lancet Commission. Okay, so how does that style of eating, if we kind of combine those two, compare to the current style of eating? Well, in order to accomplish that style of eating, to have a better impact on our health and our environment, we would need to reduce our consumption of red meat by 50%, and this is as a whole in the United States. Reduce our consumption of sugar by 50%. We need to double our consumption of fruits, nuts, vegetables, and legumes, right? We need to make sure we replace those things that we're reducing with some other plant-based healthy foods. And then in general, lower our overall calorie consumption. So those are things that would need to happen for us to get to those, merging of two styles of eating. Again, good for your body, good for the planet. And here's some practical ways on how to do that. Okay, so I tried to focus on everyday solutions, things that you can do at home, and kind of what I would call a sprinkling of changes. I don't want anyone to ever think this is all or none. Not everyone needs to go vegan. If you want to, great, vegetarian, flexitarian, whatever it might be. But I also want to encourage small change throughout, right? Just some little changes for you and your family that may be helpful to you and the environment. So number one is decrease your meat intake, right? We saw those graphics, so that would be kind of the number one area. Red meat specifically. Consume it less often. I think that's a great tagline. Just less often. If I'm 3 times a week, let me go to twice a week or even once a week. I've made a change. Consuming a smaller portion is another way to make that change. Focus on maybe no more than about a 3 or 4 ounce portion at a time. Swap out your red meat for poultry or seafood. A dish doesn't have to suffer necessarily. We just make some sort of change in there. Promote a meatless Monday or a Tuesday or a Wednesday or a Friday or whatever works for your family sometime during the week. You can certainly use animal-based protein alternatives like beans and nuts and tofu, or you can do without and double up on the veggies. Another good tip would be to center your recipe or meal around the grain instead of the meat. And for that one, what I'll generally do is just Google good quinoa recipes or good farro recipes. That way I've got a good solid recipe that's based on the grain and it's not necessarily meat-based. Cook an extra vegetable. I mean, we want to make sure we have something. If we're pulling some things out, we want to have some other foods to replace them. So cook an extra different vegetable. So you have variety at that one meal, which is great for our bodies anyway, but it's also going to provide some more plant-based nutrition in there. Choose fruit for dessert, and then purchase locally grown food and organically grown when available. And Susan's going to touch on that one a little bit more. So again, ways that you and your family can practice some of these things at home. All right, so how about for you at the office? We're here 8 to 10 hours a day. So what can we do here? I will say that MUSC and CDCES have actually made some good impacts in the cafeteria. So if you're eating in the cafeteria, I'm happy to report there are some really cool things that they're doing. Okay, specifically, they're using compostable food containers right now. And when those aren't available due to limited supply production, which it happens, we know, they're using recyclable containers. They also buy a lot of their produce from Limehouse whenever they can, and Limehouse is a local purveyor of farmed foods from the area, so they're purchasing locally as well. All food scrapes and leftover waste is composted as well. Got a great composting program happening. All the eggs and poultry in the cafeteria are AB, steroid, and cage free. So making good choices when it comes to some of those types of foods. They also offer a plant-based burger at the grill. If none of you have tried it, it's really fabulous, so give it a shot. And they're looking into things for the future too. I know right now they're investigating a plant-based concept in the cafe. So these are fun things that we want to be able to support here while we're at the office. On the other hand, there are things that you can do as well, and that might be pack from home. Sounds like we've got some good things going on from the cafeteria, but when we're packing from home, certainly we're using less packaging. You tend to have a more well-rounded food meal, especially if you're pulling that meal from your dinner meal the night before, when we've really had some time to think about, is this a balanced plate? Do I have several food groups at one time? And it's a good way to portion control. Whatever you put in the container is what you've got, and you don't have anything else. If you are going to go to the cafeteria to enjoy some of the delicious food, I would encourage you to bring your own utensils. That's an easy peasy one, and I've got a couple of pictures here because there's so many fun ones out there to get. Bring your own straw if you're a straw user. Choose plant-based items in the cafeteria when you can. Also, try the feature food. That means that we're trying to utilize a product, or maybe it was something that was procured from local. So I would encourage you to kind of go with what they're promoting in the cafeteria as well. Choose foods with less packaging. Sometimes side-by-side comparison, you can just visually see this is a better choice for the environment. Skip the bags. I know they're at the lines at the register, but if you can skip it, let's do it. And dispose of your packaging properly. So all of this, again, comes full circle, not just about what you're consuming, but what do we do with all this stuff in the end. Support local when you can, which again, the cafeteria is doing that. And also be the person to bring the plant-based dish to the event, which sometimes that's hard to do. It might not be the most popular choice initially, but if someone finds out that you made like the best vegan mac and cheese or cauliflower crust pizza, you might be the hit of the party. So encourage some conversation through that. And then some other practical solutions about hydration. Certainly want to make sure we're filling our body up with plenty of fluid throughout the day. I think it's easy to get caught up at work and forget about that. One of the best ways to do that is to bring some sort of water bottle, whether it's something you're reusing or
this is reusable. Yes, and recyclable. Sorry.
Fill it up 3 times. Set yourself with a goal. So again, good hydration for your body, or bring something that you've got at home, similar to what we send the kids to school with. There you go. Any of those work though. I think about sending the kids with their water bottle, but most of the time I'm not thinking about myself. Have a mug or cup at your desk. I feel safe drinking the Charleston City water. It's safe water, so you fill up your mug several times during the day. That also gets you up and moving, gets some more steps. Helps with other things too. Utilize reusable cups and mugs at retail. So this one, for a long time, I know with the pandemic, we weren't allowed to bring reusable cups to Starbucks, but Starbucks did reenact the use of reusable cups. They just need to be clean with the lid off. And they've got a procedure that they're going to use on their end to fill up your mug. But you can do that. There was a big campaign in August about it. And when you don't have that opportunity, recycle, get rid of your cups appropriately. There's only a certain part of that cup that can actually be recycled. Starbucks white and green cup cannot, but the sleeve can and the top can. So again, part of this is about, appropriately disposing of the food packaging, so it doesn't end up in the wrong place like the ocean and wreak havoc on the ecosystem. So again, full circle for all of this stuff. So I was told to do a slide on Halloween, so here it is. Since we're close, this is a really hard one. I've got 2 kids at home that love Halloween, so it's a hard time to I don't want to demonize this holiday by any means. It's once out of the year. I think we can make a bigger impact by sprinkling all of these other things into our 364 other days. But if we are going to touch Halloween, there's a couple of things you certainly can do. Purchase organic or fair trade candy when you can, just because the farming practices and the use of no pesticides. Again, Susan will go into that a little bit later. Look for candy with less wrapping. when you're purchasing. Purchase candy in recyclable containers. And the irony here is I put dots and nerds up there, but raisins are in this category too, and that's a fruit. So certainly raisins are in this category. I did call the recycling center, and they said they would take any of these products as long as the food is actually out of it. So these small little boxes can be recycled. Teach children to dispose of wrappers appropriately. If we have this wonderful campaign to buy these recyclable boxes, but they get thrown in the trash, I'm not sure what good that did. So again, teaching children and others to dispose of properly. Provide fresh fruit. You will not be the most popular person on the block, but that's certainly an option. Provide practical giveaways instead of candy. This one's hard because, again, we don't want to end up with a bunch of plastic waste either. The only two things I could think of here were pencils, because they get used in school, and temporary tattoos. And then the other one is ration your child's intake. So for me, this one really hits home, right? Instead of consuming all the candy within a week, what if I take some of that candy and put it slowly in their lunchbox? What it's going to do is not let me put the cookie in. So I'm, in a sense, saving or sparing some food and packaging that I would have normally purchased to put something sweet in their bag. So those are just some tips for Halloween. And then a couple of online tools. A lot of the information that I got here is from the Harvard School of Public Health. They have a real big sustainability initiative and a lot of information online. They've got a really great food print calculator if you want to know specifically, what is my impact? What is my diet impact on the earth? Monterey Bay Aquarium Seafood Guide. They've got a great Southeast guide for which seafoods to choose that are more sustainable for the ecosystem, the environment, everything. And then a little bit more on the planetary health diet that I presented earlier, and again, in comparison to the Mediterranean diet. And then there's also this TerraCycling program, which I feel like was a real big thing for a while. You saw the Capri Sun pocketbooks and pants and all these kind of things made out of packaging. It's still there. You just have to search for it. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of places in our area, but if you're in a situation where you're with a company or school or something that's using the same product over and over, you could consider going to this website. They will actually send you free boxes to collect those kind of products and then send them back for free so that they can get recycled. The catch is they're very brand specific. So Capri Sun would have one, Tom's toothpaste would have one. So they're very brand specific and don't cross over. But if you're able to do that, something to look into. Okay, I think that's it from my end. So here's Susan.
All right, that transition was easy. So my part of the presentation was actually on one of Laura's slides, and that is to kind of take a step back, and we're going to start with where does the food come from and some of the things that we need to consider when we are choosing the foods that we then will prepare as meals. And so Laura did a great job of talking about nutrition choices. I'm going to talk about it from a little bit more of a holistic perspective. And I'm really excited to be here. I've been working with Christine really since probably the first couple of years that I came to MUSC, when we started working on the urban farm together. And she actually asked me to do a presentation for the Charleston Green Business Challenge. And that topic was kind of the intersection between wellness and sustainability. And then, which was, 8 years ago, our disciplines were very siloed. I think they still are, but I'm starting to see more of kind of an integration between health, wellness, and sustainability. And I think it's so important. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that in my part of the presentation. I'm really fortunate and honored to be participating in the first fellowship, Sustainability Leadership Fellowship class. This is a partnership between SustainSC and the Shy Institute at Furman, and actually joined my cohort last week for our first session and learned so much and was really surprised, not surprised, but I guess glad to see how much more holistic I think the whole study of sustainability has become. And I think that we all have a role to play. And for me, with my health and wellness and health promotion background, it is a passion for me, and I'm really glad to be able to contribute. So I really like this model because I think really it creates this idea that we are so dependent upon our environment, and if we don't protect it, then the health and well-being and economic drivers are secondary to that. And we're starting to see this now, and I think that's really where people are starting to get it, and the red flags are going up, and because they're actually seeing the negative impacts on health and on the economy because we have not been good stewards of the natural environment. And so we really need to recognize how important it is and how it impacts our health and our livelihood. So in talking about the food system and ways that we can try and focus on sustainability in the food system, I need to first kind of talk about what it is. And so this, I think, graphic does a great job of describing it, in particular focusing on the local food system. Now it will be a whole other conversation to talk about this globally, and I will highlight a few things that I think are important in the context to understand that this is not just a local issue, but it's a global issue, and that we need to recognize that. But for the topic of our conversation today, we really want to kind of focus on our local community and things that we can do to support sustainable food systems in our community. So I'm going to focus on production. So the agricultural industry, obviously there are a lot of things that we can talk about around that. I'm going to just highlight a few important issues and topics around that. Processing, I'm not going to get into too much, but as you can imagine, and as Laura kind of alluded to, fresher is better. And so the less processes that food is put through before it reaches the grocery store or your table or your plate, the better, not only for your health, but also for the environment. Distribution is huge related to sustainability, which is why we want to focus on local, because of all of the emissions. And then really like the shelf life, having to put in preservatives, because if it takes a week to get it from point A to point B, obviously there are going to be some additives, things added to your food to make sure that it is it can last. Access. So where do we access this fresh and local food? And it could be any. We'll talk about some of those different places that you can access food. Consumption, Laura covered that, and she also covered kind of the waste and recovery as well, so I'm not going to get into that. So some of the issues that I think are really important when we think about healthy, sustainable food and food system, and Laura has talked about this, but really how thinking about how the choices that we make about what we eat impacts not only our own health, but also our communities, the air, water, and our climate. And then we need to consider all aspects of the food system. So all those things that I just went over, including production, packaging, really get into that. That would be a whole other conversation as well. Transportation and waste. And then really the interconnectedness with other social issues that I think, we tend to not think about when we focus on sustainability or health and wellness. I think it's important to recognize that access, equity, hunger, poverty, natural disasters are all things that we need to consider. Some other ways to look at it related to healthy and sustainable food systems. One is inclusiveness. And again, this is making sure that every participant in that food system, and so that really means all of us because we are consumers, but also those involved in that whole system, from farmers growing to canneries to the truck drivers to folks who are selling in the grocery store and restaurants. We need to make sure that we are considering every person along that chain and being inclusive. Resilience, again, looking at what is happening as a result of climate change. We really need to again, along that whole system, think about what are the impacts and how we can minimize our footprint and how we're impacting climate change, and then also preparing for it because it's really already here. So what are the things that we can do to become more resilient in the current context of what we're dealing with? And then efficiency. So Laura talked about food waste and loss. I'm going to talk a little bit more about the importance of that around a growing population and increased need. And then finally, Laura really focused on this for the bulk of her presentation, which is understanding which foods to choose that are safe, sustainable, and healthy. So in my first session with the Sustainability Leadership Institute, we learned about the United Nations Sustainability Development Goals. And I, to be honest with you, had not heard of this before. And when I first saw these 17 areas, I thought, wow, that's a lot. Like, are we trying to boil the ocean? Is it too much? But then when we started to really talk about each one of these, it made sense to me, and it made me realize how interconnected they all are. And so I'm going to read through them really quick, and I want you to just think about, for each one as I read them, is there a relation between this development goal and the topic of today, which is sustainable nutrition and sustainable food systems? So number one is no poverty. Sorry, I have to look at my other screen because I can see it better. Number two, no hunger. 3, good health. 4, quality education. 5, gender equality. 6, clean water and sanitation. 7, renewable energy. 8, good jobs and economic growth. 9, innovation and infrastructure. 10, reduced inequalities. 11, sustainable cities and communities. 12, responsible consumption. 13, climate action. 14, life below water. 15, life on land. 16, peace and justice, and then 17 is partnerships for all the goals. So as I said, this really hit home for me because I really saw how health and wellness really is intertwined in each one of these, and sustainability, and we all need to be working together. So I can see health, nutrition, and the food systems in almost all of these. But I have a little video clip that can do a better job explaining this than I can. So I'm going to play this for you. So I think we have a huge opportunity. South Carolina is an agricultural state, and I do believe that South Carolina is leading in sustainability and conservation and environmental innovation. And so I'm going to try and weave in some examples of some great things that we are doing at the state and local level as we look at some of these issues. So as I mentioned, and as Laura mentioned, we need to also consider not only, some of the things that we talked about around, waste and making good decisions, but and nutrition, but also the fact that some people really struggle putting any food on the table. And so what does that look like? And we are only going to continue to see that increase. So the forecasting is suggesting that we're going to see an increase in over 2 billion people between now and 2050, and then another 2.5 billion of that will actually be living in cities. So that obviously, from a logistical and transportation perspective, is quite alarming. And then you can just look at kind of the increased demands on the food system. And at the same time, we are seeing a negative impact of climate change on food production. And so this slide shows that by 2030, 9 out of 10 of the major crops will experience reduced or stagnant growth. And that's alarming when you think about the fact that you look at that previous slide and those numbers. We need to do something about what is happening to food production as a result of climate change or just not sustainable farming practices. And so this slide really kind of addresses the different areas of concern and how they impact the availability of enough food to feed everyone and enough healthy and safe food. But also at the same time, some of these issues are impacting negatively the environment. So, these are just in general terms, some of the consequences in particular of farming that is not sustainable or agriculture that's not sustainable. So we see soil degradation, which Laura talked about in terms of nutrients, and then just not yielding as many crops, water scarcity, a lot around pesticides that are pollutants and also are create an unsafe food network. So, a couple different issues there. Pollinator decrease. This is huge. I also serve on the VCAUS board, so I'm a big fan of the bees and Save the Bees. We need to be recognizing those concerns. And then I think from the social economic perspective, we're starting to see, especially with family farms, fewer young people wanting to go into agriculture. So how do we address that issue? And then again, kind of that the issues of productivity. So there are a lot of different strategies related to agriculture and farming that we would consider to be sustainable practices. Some are becoming more common. I mean, more and more. If you think about just in probably the past 10 years, if you go, when you go to the grocery store, there are so many more options for choosing organic. And I think there's a lot more education around sustainable agriculture. So we're starting to see some of these strategies implemented. But I would say probably the most significant driver is innovation. And we're really starting to see more funding around creating innovative solutions for farmers. Because quite frankly, especially in South Carolina, the family farmer doesn't have the resources to put into some of these practices that are necessary to mitigate the risks. And so being able to partner and find solutions, I think, is key. So I'm going to highlight 2 examples in South Carolina that we should be really proud of. These are things that are going on here. One is a company called Green Gas, and they basically are able to, through their technology, capture methane that is being released from agriculture and also from food production, canning and things like that, and capture the methane that is being released. And so it's not damaging, it's not contributing to greenhouse gases, it's not damaging the ozone layer. And so not only are they capturing it, which is step 1, but then step 2 is that they're converting it to clean energy. So renewable natural gas, and then they're able to transport it. Right now, depending on where it's going, they're able to transport it through trucks, but they also are partnering with Dominion Energy, and they're able to tap into the pipeline, and then they can sell that clean energy to either directly or indirectly to companies that are looking to become carbon neutral. So for instance, they announced about a month or so ago that they have a long-term contract with Duke University. And so that's just one example of a company in South Carolina that is kind of leading in this innovation around sustainability. And then another one, this was one that was announced just a couple weeks ago. This is Milliken Forestry, which is a company in South Carolina, is partnering with Green Trees LLC, which is a company in Virginia. And they have come together to provide an opportunity for farmers to plant forests on their farmland that they can then sell carbon credits. Green Trees will sell carbon credits and the farmer can receive compensation for that. So it really is a win-win-win because again, those carbon credits they can sell to companies who are looking to become carbon neutral but don't have the capacity at their facilities to do so. And it helps the farmers because from an economic standpoint, but also they'll be very strategic in terms of where they plant those on farmland. So that can help with flooding and drainage and, all the things that we would be concerned about. I think it's really a great example. So I wanted to share those two with you. So I'm going to shift now. You're probably saying, well, I'm not a farmer and I don't really have, I understand the importance of knowing about those things, but for me personally, I can't really do anything about that. So I'm going to move now into some things that we do have control over, and that is where we choose to buy our produce and our food and some of the choices that we can make and how we can make better sustainable choices. So as I mentioned, a lot of farmers are moving towards organic farming. Why should we choose to do that as a consumer? Oftentimes people are like, well, it's more expensive, so why would I do that? But I think that gap we are seeing it narrow, and and we also have a lot more options for organic produce that make it more affordable, but really it again helps cut down on pollution, so contributes to clean air, water, helps with soil erosion. We don't have those hormones going into the food that we're eating and or contaminating the water and the soil. It's healthier for the farmers and workers and their families, and it actually tastes better because there's nothing added to it. And then why should we choose local when we're choosing our produce? So we talked a little bit about the transportation component of the food system, and the further food has to be transported, the more it is, the more negative impact it's having on the environment from emissions and any additives that need to be put into the food. It helps preserve green spaces in our communities. It helps support the local farmers and their families, puts money back into our local economy. It helps to create community and connection, and then again, less preservatives. And I will say the Department of Agriculture has a great website. This is where this logo comes from. They also have a program called Fresh on the Menu that they recognize restaurants that are using local produce. MUSC, CDCES actually is a Fresh on the Menu organization. And you can also search for where to find local produce in your area. They have a fantastic website, so I would definitely suggest that. Another organization that I wanted to highlight is Slow Food Charleston. Now, Slow Food is a national, maybe international organization. I think it's national. I think there's over 200 local chapters, and we have a fantastic chapter here in Charleston, and they are really focused on making sure that they are working with all of the producers, purveyors, chefs, restaurateurs to provide them with education, resources, and the connections that they need to provide that food that is good, fair, clean, and for everyone. Another great organization that you may be aware of is Grow Food Carolina. Just in the interest of time, I'm going to skip over the video, but this one, the video is actually a little bit old, but they are a food hub and really, again, kind of leading in this space. And it's an organization, it's a nonprofit through the Coastal Conservation League, but they work with smaller farmers and purveyors and kind of bring the farmers bring the food, and then they distribute it to the local restaurants. And if you go to their website, you can see who they distribute to. So if you want to make better choices about where you're purchasing your food, that's a great resource. Another are farmers markets, and a lot of reasons why we should visit farmers markets, but just kind of the highlights. Again, stimulating the local economy. The food is not traveling as far. It actually brings healthy food and produce into the communities that may be food deserts. There are systems that can put food, healthy produce into the hands of folks who may not be able to afford it through SNAP and other programs like that, and supports healthy communities, including that social component. Community supported agriculture, so the CSA programs, I'm sure a lot of you are probably familiar with these. The two that I have on my slide, interestingly, Legree Farms is one that Laura uses, and so she can say yes, they are great. And then my colleague Caitlin DePore is currently using the Low Country Street Grocery CSA, but it's just a great way to have food. It's either a pickup or a delivery. Laura, do you have yours delivered?
Pick it up.
You pick it up, and then Caitlin has hers delivered. So a couple different ways that you can do it, but it's really fun to get. It's like it's probably just like opening up a
Surprise box of produce.
Yeah, it's like my Rent the Runway box or my Birch box. It's just fun to be surprised and see what's there, and it's always obviously something that's in season. And I think it also kind of encourages creativity in the kitchen and learning about new types of food that you may not have tried. Vertical Roots, another example of sustainable food practice that is right here in our backyard. Abundant Seafood, again, because we're backing up to the end of our presentation, I'm just going to quickly go through these slides, and but I think that Christine will make them available. I have links in all of these. Sustainable restaurant practices. I know of one, this is a national certification that the Obstinate Daughter and Wild Olive are certified, but you actually can get a score on all those different environmental categories. But other places that you can look, in addition to Grow Food Carolina, where you can look and see where they deliver their food, you can also go to the Low Country Local First website, and they have a great list of restaurants and resources to find those purveyors and restaurants that are providing that. And as well, the Good Catch program from the aquarium. So Laura mentioned the Monterey Aquarium. Our South Carolina Aquarium is doing great work around sustainability, keeping plastics out of the ocean, all those good things. But they have a list as well of restaurants that are purchasing their seafood locally. And then finally, just to wrap up, I just really like this idea of bringing it back all together and looking at sustainable food systems, just like we do health and well-being, very holistically, and looking at those the interconnectedness of all of these different issues and topics. And then here's my Halloween slide, and that is an actual coupon. If you go to Legree Farms, or if you want to, Christine shares this, you can print out your gate admission, and then the other picture I think came from Boone Hall. But anyway, it's been a pleasure to be here with you, and we have just a few minutes left if anyone has any questions for us.
That was fabulous, Susan and Laura. Thank you so much. Great job. There is one question in the chat already. Is there anywhere on campus that we can compost lunch scraps? I could probably go ahead and answer that. It's our cafeterias now, Sean Jenkins and Art and the main hospital all have compost recycling bins or compost bins available, along with recycling bins and landfill bins. And you should be able to see exactly what goes in there. There's signage. There are examples in little shadow boxes. You can also compost on the first floor of basic science and the first floor of bioengineering building. And I believe there's one bin on the first floor of Rutledge Tower. And we're trying to extend that to other buildings on campus.
Our intern Brendan is on the call as well, and we're going to be alternating questions with him. So Brendan, if you want to hop on and ask this next one, you can.
All right, so it says, can we take our stuff even if it's from home?
I guess I'll answer this one again. So technically the answer is no. DHEC really wants products that were produced in the facility to be composted in the facility. So if you do have compost at home, there are options for you. There are composting companies in the local Charleston area. Compost Now is one of them. And there used to be a company called Compost in My Shoe. Not sure if that's still available, but they will help you with your home compost.
Terry Lynn says, gee, are they going to do a DNA trace? Yeah, how would they know?
Yeah, that's funny, Terry Lynn. Yeah, I don't know that they're going to know. I'm just telling you what I know.
If you do
I'm not telling you what to do.
Christine's not watching.
Nancy says that none of these companies come to Johns Island. I was having the same problem in my part of Mount Pleasant when I lived there. Compost Now, they have a certain map of the Charleston area which they service, and my parents' house was slightly outside of the map. But what you can do is just go on their website and try to sign up with your zip code, because the more demand that you generate, then the more likely they are to include your area. So get your friends together. I tried to post it on my Facebook page saying, like, everybody put in my zip code so that I can do this.
It's a good idea.
Yeah, and I think that there are other places that you could do it, at least downtown. I think CFC has like some gardens where you could put it, or you could try to make your own in your backyard. You don't even have to buy like the expensive thing. Like you could just try to make your own bucket or something. So there are options. It is a question. I did, yeah. I had a question. In one of the beginning slides, you were mentioning how I guess the USDA had like pledged in 2015 to reduce the food waste in the US by 50%. So I'm just wondering like what progress has been made on that, because that was a few years ago. So I'm wondering if it's been reduced so far and how that's going.
I don't know. I honestly don't know what the progress is, but I can certainly look that up and get back with you.
Yeah, I'd be interested. Is that
yeah,
a lot?
The pledge was pre-pandemic, is the other kind of catch, or a little bit of a hiccup to that. You know, even from a packaging waste perspective, I feel like we might have taken a couple steps back with the pandemic and everything being non-reusable and single-use stuff. So I'll find out.
Thank you.
So we have someone online from Virginia. Sometimes farmers markets in their area will have a composting station, is what she's saying. So that's a unique option. Thank you for letting us know that. Maybe we'll have to talk to our farmers markets about that. I do know that the city of Charleston is working on an option for dropping off composting. So as soon as that's available, we can get the information to you.
Yes, we would be all over that.
Yeah. And, you know, you mentioned the water fountains. I think, Lauren, you mentioned it. Yeah, the water is very good in Charleston. At MUSC, we do have a lot of those water fountains that are water bottle fillers, and they actually have filters in them that are changed often. So, you know, just another reason to drink fresh Charleston water when you're on campus, especially. Terry Lynn says the tap water in Charleston is better and cleaner than bottled water. And oftentimes she's right. It's the bottled water that you're paying an arm and a leg for is actually tap water. And you just don't even know that. You're buying something that you could have gotten out of the tap.
It's been sitting in plastic for who knows how long.
Right.
seeping into your water. So
Yeah.
we love tap water.
Brendan, did you have any questions?
I do have a question.
You on the spot.
So one of the main things that you guys were talking about is kind of like cutting out over-processed foods and everything for sustainable nutrition. I'm gluten-free, so does that throw any caveats into anything? Is that like inherently overly processed, or how does that work?
Oh, no, that's actually a good question. I actually think you can probably do a better job on a gluten-free diet because most of the processed food is, processed wheat. It's harder to find processed food that's, made from an alternative. No, there are a ton of grains for you to use. Actually, and again, I think it gives you kind of that flexibility to trial some new grains, so farro and quinoa, anything other than wheat and barley basically is what you're looking for. So no, I think you're in a good position to do that.
That's awesome. That's good to know.
Well, I have one quick question. What is the best milk?
Ooh, that's a loaded question.
Alternative.
Yeah, are you asking about milk or milk alternative?
Milk alternative.
Okay. Yeah. So the thing about milk is it's a great source of calcium, vitamin D, and protein. So what you're really trying to do is mirror that, unless you've got some other way to get it in your diet. And, tofu certainly, but that's a lot of tofu and it's not regularly in people's diets. So whatever milk you're trying to choose from a nutrition perspective, I would say you're looking for something with 30% of your calcium and vitamin D needs and with at least 5 grams of protein, because a cup of milk is going to provide about 8 grams of protein. So trying to look at the label and figure out which milk is going to model what I'm missing from not drinking the cow's milk, I think is the best way to go. And typically it's a fortified milk, meaning they've added that stuff to it, because you're really not going to get it from any of your animal plant-based milks, with the exception of soy milk. So if you like soy milk, I would probably say that's the golden one.
Oh, okay. Is that the golden one from the environmental perspective?
That's a great question. It's probably one of the better ones. I don't know. Honestly, I don't know between oat and almond and soy. I don't know. I mean, I'd say that the plant-based are certainly better from the environment versus the animal-based, but I don't know between the three.
I do know that almond milk uses a lot of water in the production,
Yeah.
so that's sort of a negative thing. But yeah, it's one of those lingering questions out there.
It's a tough one. I mean, almond milk, it's got a lot of marketing behind it too, but again, you're really not going to get the protein power that you are, and unless it's fortified, you're not going to get the calcium or vitamin D, and we know those are nutrients that are desperately in need in Americans in the United States right now.
And Terry Lynn put something in the chat. She says the local goat dairies have fabulous milk,
Okay.
and you can buy that at the farm and get your eggs at the same time.
Where's that located?
So yeah, Terry Lynn, if you can give us, an example of which farm is doing that or which farms, we can put that with, Susan's going to give us a list of links, and we can add that information in there as well. And we could also add a list of farmers markets that we have.
Maybe gather a list of composting locations as well.
Yeah, that answer all these questions at one time. She says Jeremiah Farms on Johns Island. They also teach cheese classes.
That's cool.
Try to say that 2 times quick. Thank you so much, Susan. Thank you so much, Laura and Brendan and Rachel, for all your help. This was great, and I hope everyone has a fabulous day.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.